Hey there! I'm Chroma, and welcome to part 9 of making an abstract adventure. Welcome back. This time, we've made another ability for our circle character. Now, last time I said it was going to be a bounce attack, but since then I've kind of changed my mind, and instead we've made a circle glide move thing. And I'm going to go into play mode and show it off to then also show why we're not doing a bounce. So first of all, while holding U, if we're falling, then we glide. So basically just a slower descent, and we have the circle glide script down here, or we can see we have this glide fall speed that is basically just directly setting the Y velocity moving downwards. So we have that, and even if we're holding the button and we can still jump, double jump, we can still do the lunge slash attack, and we just fall slower, which I guess could be good for platforming related stuff. And we can see I've also added a lot more clouds here so we can better tell that the gliding is working and all that. So we have that. As well, so the reason why I've decided not to have the bounce attack is just because the air lunge that we have kind of already covers anything that the bounce would have done. So like being able to smash into the floor and like break weak flooring to like fall through like hatches or something like that, as well as maybe bouncing to get to high places, our air lunge kind of already does all of that. So one thing I have also done to sort of update how the air lunge works is if you launch into a wall, you kind of bounce off it, which gives more bounciness and all that, which I think is good. It works better with our character being a ball and all that. So yeah, we can like also bounce off the floor, which I guess also works with bouncing, and we'll use that for like breaking through certain objects and all that. So yeah. Oh, as well with the falling slow descent thing, animation wise, we're probably gonna have the sphere sort of like inflate, so it looks kind of like a balloon, more or less, something like that. But that stuff we'll worry about when we actually get to polish and animation and all that fancy stuff. As well, over with our cube character, our shurikens that we throw, I've also allowed them to bounce off of walls as well, using kind of some of the same code as we'll get into in a moment. So now, yeah, the shurikens that we throw actually bounce off of stuff, and when we throw them, we get a bit more of an air boost, which just, I don't know, makes it slightly better. But yeah, so I think this could also be very good later on for whatever platforming puzzle-esque type things that we get into doing. Having the shuriken have to like bounce off a wall to like hit a button or something like that, I think it could be a cool thing to do. I've also increased the amount of time before the shurikens get destroyed. We'll see later on whether or not that ends up being a problem, if like it's hitting things off screen and if that's an issue. I could eventually change the shuriken's getting destroyed thing to, instead of being on a timer of when it leaves like the boundaries of the camera or something like that. But for now, we're not going to worry about it. We'll get into that if we actually need to do that. So yeah, that's that. So now let's go into the code and show how all this is working, starting with the glide and then showing the miscellaneous improvement stuff. So starting with our circle glide, it's pretty small script here, although getting it to work is trying a whole bunch of different things to try and get the glide to work. But yeah, this ended up being what worked successfully. So starting off, we have the public float for our glide fall speed, as we saw in the inspector, and references to the rigid body and the player ground check. Hold on, actually from things I was doing before, I'm realizing I don't actually need the player ground check anymore. That was something that was sort of left in from when I was trying to do stuff before with testing whether or not we were grounded before gliding, but it's not needed anymore. As well, they're also, as before, I was trying to do stuff with setting like the gravity scale and stuff like that, but it was just this ended up working a lot better. So, and then we have a reference to the rigid body, and then we get that reference in start, and then we have a public void called glide, a public function called glide that is, as with most of the abilities that we've made, is something in our circle main script. We get the reference here, and actually get the reference in awake, and then having in update calling this function on the circle glide every frame, so we can better keep track of with the order that these things run, and we can disable them easier. Like, if just disabling this script will disable all of these other scripts easily and make them not run, which makes things better for when we're like switching characters or temporarily disabling controls for whatever reason. Anyway, so then we're testing if we press the U key, and then if the rigid body's velocity.y is less than the glide fall speed, then we're directly setting the velocity. I'm also, because of switching things around, I could just make this if this and, like, I make it an and thing and just have one if statement, but I'll do that later. Yeah, so then we're basically just directly setting the velocity to the glide fall speed if it's less than what the glide fall speed should be. So if we're still moving up, we're going to continue moving up. It's only once we fall that we sort of lock the speed being slower, and we leave the X velocity unaffected. So that's basically how that glide's done. Onto the shuriken. Where is, yeah, so over down here we've added a private, like, on collision enter for testing if this object has collided with something, and then sort of reflecting its velocity if need be. As well, to get this to actually work properly, I've made another private vector 2 called last velocity, which is basically the velocity in the last frame, so we can get what the velocity was when it hit the wall so that we can invert it, because if we try to get the velocity of the frame that where you collide with the object, because of the collision kind of already happening, the velocity, the X velocity was sort of getting zeroed out for that frame it's in contact with the wall, so we need to get the velocity of the frame beforehand when it was still going full force at the wall. So then, yeah, so then in update, we're just setting last velocity to the rigid body dot velocity. And yeah, that's all working just fine. And then in this on collision enter, we're testing if the thing we collided with is on layer 8, which I believe is what we did before. But then in here, we just destroyed the game object. Now, instead of destroying it, we're taking its velocity and then using this function called vector2.reflect, which I believe, yeah, as it says there, it takes its input, the in direction, which is the velocity that it's going at, which in this case, we're using the last velocity variable. And then a second input that is the in normal, which is basically the normal vector of the wall, which we're getting this through going collision.contacts 0, because this is a an array of all the contact points that we've collided with in this frame on this object, but just getting the first element of that array, because for the most part it'll usually just be one. Yeah, and then getting dot normal is getting that normal vector. And go back to Unity for a second. The normal vector would be, if we were colliding with this wall, it's going to be kind of the equivalent of an arrow pointing from here that way, kind of perpendicular from the wall. So yeah, that's what's that doing. So then it's taking as input, so like our rigid body velocity, let's say, going this way, and then the normal going out this way, and then it returns this sort of reflected velocity going like out that way at the same sort of angle that it hit the wall, just opposite, basically. Like you saw it in action, like of how it's working. It's basically how in real life how something would kind of reflect off a wall if it were reflected perfectly, like a pool ball hitting the walls of the pool table, stuff like that. Anyway, so that's how that is done. Then the circle lunge slash does the same thing as well. I have, yeah. Oh, the player change. I did just change the button to Q just because. Sort of trying to plan a like a keyboard button layout. I'm more so planning for a controller and then trying to map out how the buttons would fit best on a keyboard. And that's all just going to be playing around with what feels right, I guess. But more so once we actually get like all of the moves programmed in, then we'll be switching around buttons around more and figuring out what works. As well, not every move will be like unlocked at the start of the game. You'll sort of unlock abilities as you go through levels and all that. Sort of ease the player into things, not have things be super complex right away. But anyway, so then the circle lunge slash, I've also done basically the same thing of adding this last velocity, as well as a few other references like to the player double jump script that I'll get to why that is down here. Yeah. Oh, and then as well a private wolf called lunging, which is going to be used for while that's set to true, while we're in the act of lunging, is when we're doing the testing to bounce off a wall. So down here-ish, yeah, so basically have sort of the same script here of having the on collision enter, and then if we're lunging, which up here in this wait to lunge function, we have like right as we start to lunge, we're setting it to true, and then after the delay of when we're lunging, after the lunge is done, then we're setting it to false. So that's where that's being changed. So in that time frame of it being true, if we collide with something on collision.gameObject.layer8, that, as we've looked at over here, where is it? In layer, it's on the environment layer, as well made two other layers, player and no player collision. I'll get to that in a second. But layer 8 is the environment layer that we put all of our walls and floors and these crates and all that stuff on. So if it's collide with anything in that layer, because at the moment we don't want to be colliding off of, or like bouncing off of like enemies or non-environmental stuff, but again, that could change later on. We might also have a special layer for like, I don't know, some sort of slippery surface or something that we can't bounce off of, or something like that. Yeah, so then taking the velocity, using the same reflect thing with last velocity as we're calculating up here in the equivalent of the sort of update function here that's running from the circle main script. And then the exact same calculation here for how we get the normal vector of the wall. So that is how that's done there. But as well, another small change I had to make to this was, where is it? So right when we do the lunge, we're also manually, I've gotten a reference to the is grounded, or to the player ground check and testing if we're grounded. And if we were grounded, so if we're using the lunge while on the ground, I'm manually setting it to false here, as well as setting player double jump to here, because there's just a minor, not really a bug, but a thing that's happening where if you lunge while on the ground, the double jump is already disabled and stuff like that. So this was counteracting this. As well, instead of this being on a timer now, there being like a lunge delay, you can only lunge once while in the air, and once you hit the ground, then it resets. That just works better with the floating, the circle glide thing, because otherwise you'd be able to kind of infinitely go up, and this was just the way of sort of combating that, without having to just make the delay super long, which would be problematic. Lastly, honor square shuriken throw. There was something I changed. Oh yeah, increasing the like having this air boost be a lot bigger and actually making it a variable up here, as well as when we throw it, just setting the y velocity to 0 and then doing this add force, so it's a consistent air boost upwards, but as well not affecting the x velocity, so we're still moving left and right the same, so it's less so it's not like stopping the player as much, so it's more fluid movement wise, and all of that. So one thing I said I was going to talk about and then completely forgot to was this on the layers. I've made two more layers called player and no player collision. This was used for, I put the players, or two characters here, on the player layer, and then I used no player collision. I put the our shurikens on that layer so that the shurikens don't collide with the player as they're being thrown. Because I've had to, with the shurikens being able to bounce off of walls, I've, where is it? Over here. I've set the is trigger back to false on the collider, so it's actually like a physical thing now. So I've also set its layer to no player collision. And then if we go up to edit, and I believe it's preferences? No, hold on. Edit and project settings. Then down to, yeah, physics 2D. Down here, this mess of checkboxes. By unchecking where it says player here and no player collision, by unchecking where they intersect, this will basically make anything on the player layer will not collide with anything on the no player collision layer. So basically the shurikens will go through the players, which is what we want right now. Yeah, and if you unchecked any other boxes, it would make those layers not collide with each other. So yeah, that's that. That's a small thing, I guess important to mention, but yeah, back to where I was before I cut away. So that is basically it. A whole bunch of just miscellaneous changes, making certain things work better together. and all of that. But yeah, so that's basically then the next circle attack done. Next time, I guess we're going to be working on another cube attack, unless something changes again. But yeah, we're basically just going to kind of go back and forth until, yeah, we're almost done. We have 2 more cube attacks to make, or abilities. One to stick to a wall, and then I forgot what the other one was off the top of my head. And then for the sphere, having a reflect thing, which originally I said it was going to be like a shield reflect, but I might not do that. Have it just, you hold down a button to reflect anything coming at you. I mean, like projectile-wise, or something like that. We'll work it out. Or maybe I may get a shield. I don't know. We'll figure that out. But anyways, so that'll be it for this episode. Thank you all so much for watching. And as always, I'll see you around.